Okay, today my guest is Professor Bodo Schlegelmilch, and I'll keep my introduction short to maximize our time with him. In the next 30 minutes or so, we'll talk about Bodo as a person, Professor Schlegelmilch is a thought leader and an esteemed scholar, and finally, as a mentor to many PhD students and junior faculty. For the sake of time, I'll skip many of his accomplishments and give you a very quick snapshot. Bodo is a fellow of the AIB, the Chartered Institute of Marketing and the Academy of Marketing Science. He has published over 150 journal articles, 14 books in English, German, and Mandarin, and has over 200 academic conference presentations. He is among the most prolific researchers in international marketing. He has received many research awards, such as the Journal of Marketing Education Award and the Torelli Award from the Journal of International Marketing. He frequently appears in domestic and international TV, radio, and newspaper interviews. Bodo was editor-in-chief of the Journal of International Marketing and served on the editorial boards of our top-ranked journals. He is also the chair of the Association of MBAs, Global Accreditation Organization. Thank you, Bodo, for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
First question, what did you want to become when you were a child?
To be honest, I hated that question even when I was a child. This not serious answer is chair of the Association of MBAs, but I mean, seriously, I did not have a clear idea. Absolutely zero idea. I wanted to be an adult because apparently they seemed to have more fun and they could stay up longer. But other than that, I was fairly vague in terms of where I was going.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Germany near Cologne, and basically also went to school there for pretty much everything, including my undergraduate degree.
So can you remember the earliest moment of awareness between international versus domestic?
Yes, my grandparents lived near the Belgian border, in Germany, near the Belgian border. And from time to time, we ventured out and had chips or French fries, or yeah, I think in the US you call them French fries, pommes frites. And so I became aware as a child that other countries have something to offer which your own country has not, or was more difficult to find, and that intrigued me. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. They have something we don't have. So I became interested and aware of the fact that somehow other countries have interesting bits and pieces on offer.
And how did you choose academia? And specifically within academia, how did you choose this area?
Well, I was always interested in foreign countries and traveling to foreign countries, etc. And after my undergraduate degree in Cologne, I had the opportunity to go to the University of Manchester. And in contrast to Cologne, Manchester was suddenly very, very international. I suddenly had classmates from India, from Japan, from the US. And they were offering insights into cultures and insights into different perspectives which I wasn't used to, and which were just intriguing for me. So I thought, well, I have to visit these countries, and what better way of visiting countries than become an academic and have an excuse to go there.
That's funny. What's something that's not on your CV that people might find interesting about you?
Oh, that's difficult. I'm not quite sure what people find interesting, but what's not on my CV is that I'm sailing and I'm kayaking. So I like water sports. I'm not particularly good at either sailing or kayaking, but at least I like it. So that's not on my CV.
Okay, so sailing is individual activity or as a team?
No, individual.
Okay.
I have a little boat and I go out, but I'm a sort of good weather sailor. So if it's getting too rough and too cold and so on, I'm away. I'm not doing it.
If you stopped doing what you're doing today and choose a different path, a second alternative path, well, what would it be? What's the second best alternative for you?
Well, I'm glad that you say second best, because I still believe that academia for me is like a paid hobby. I really like it. So second best would be perhaps to become a travel writer, because again, that would give me the opportunity to go to other countries and immerse myself into different cultures. And I think that would be definitely the second best.
Perfect. And regrets, is there anything that you wish you would have done or done differently?
Ooh, the more interesting question is, what I have done and wouldn't have done. But difficult to say. So far I have never been to Alaska, and somehow or the other I really fancy Alaska, albeit in the summer. I would not venture there in the winter because I don't do winters very well. I'd rather spend winters in Asia. But that's definitely a country which is on my bucket list. I taught altogether so far in 31 different countries, but somehow nobody ever invited me to Alaska, so I'm still open to that.
Interesting. What was your biggest failure and what did you learn from it?
I think that's an interesting question, because I have a very specific failure, namely when I was even younger than I'm now. I was expelled from grammar school. In Germany, you had to go to grammar school, and basically you are graded from 1 to 6, where 5 and 6 are failures. 5 is just an ordinary failure, and 6 is like a social outcast, essentially meaning that you don't even understand the basics of the subject. And I actually failed in 2 languages, in Latin, believe it or not, and in English. So when that happened, I found myself going to a different school, and the different school didn't lead to, or didn't allow me to study. It was, in Britain they would call it an O level, so I had to finish with an O level. And so based on that, I started an apprenticeship at Deutsche Bank. And while I was doing the apprenticeship, I had to go to night school on top of the apprenticeship and do my A levels. And then eventually that was giving me the opportunity to study. But the failure was very traumatic to a certain degree, because I found myself suddenly realizing, my gosh, I missed out in terms of opportunities. And that shook me up. And I actually became very good at school. And when I did my A level, it was very, very good results, and I could study very nicely. But that failure experience really motivated me to, let's say, get my act together.
Interesting. My uncle actually failed, also exactly grammar school, exactly like that. I went into a bank. Then he became a great banker, actually. But I mean, your story just exactly sounded like my uncle. Okay, what are you most proud of?
But your uncle is not called Bodo, is he?
No, unfortunately not. What are you most proud of?
I think to a certain degree, the older I get, the more proud I get in terms of my former students, because somehow or the other, I can now point to students that PhD students who have now become professors in Australia, in Canada, in France, in Japan, and in the UK, and in Switzerland. So a number of sort of former PhD students have gone into academia and are quite successful, and that's nice to see. That really is nice to see. The second thing is perhaps that I had the opportunity to found a business school here, the WU Executive Academy, which is a little business school within our university, focusing on executive MBAs, LLMs, executive education, non-degree education, etc. And in this context, I also actually just before I founded an executive MBA and led it into the Financial Times top 50 within a few years. So that is also a nice thing. Yeah, what else? AMBA is still fun. The Association of MBAs, being a chair there is good fun, because we have businesses, or rather accredited schools in over 70 countries worldwide, and that means that they have to be visited sooner or later. So it brings you into all sorts of different countries again, such as unusual countries sometimes, Fiji and so on and so forth. So that is quite interesting. And perhaps last but not least, that the king of Thailand gave me an honorary degree, which is quite good, because he used to be only, quote unquote, the crown prince, and then when his father passed away, he became the king. And I was so happy for him to become the king, because it's much cooler to say that you got your honorary degree from a king rather than a mere crown prince. So I thought that's cool.
Okay. Okay, let's talk about research. How do you explain your research to people who don't read marketing journals, IB journals, strategy journals? How do you explain it to people in a pub, in a village?
The famous village question: how do you explain to villagers who don't know much about the world, etc.? Well, I would say that I teach current and future leaders on how to conduct business more efficiently and effectively, and also socially responsible. And in order to support this teaching, I carry out research and publish my research in books and journals. And I think this, in a way, is important in as far as that it teaches people how to become wealthy, and also how to perhaps understand each other better in terms of different cultures, different habits, and so on and so forth. So it is a wealth creation argument here, but also a mutual understanding argument, which I would put forward.
About I mean, I normally say omitted variables, but it's neglected variables or things that have been understudied in the field. What are some of the omitted variables, in your opinion, concepts, constructs, things that we should have thought more about in IB?
That's a difficult question, because until a few years ago, I would have said that IB is too profit focused, but this is changing, and I'm glad it is changing, because while profit is important, and no question it is important, it is not the be all end all of things. So we should also focus on social responsibility, and among others, we should perhaps focus on different outcome variables in addition to profit. So how can we capture other variables that are meaningfully complementing profit?
Like what?
So
what would be different variables that capture the different outcome?
Well, I mean, to give you an example, a concrete example, I was at Incaye in Costa Rica about a month ago, and they have a research center on happiness. And the idea is to say, okay, we are always measuring countries in terms of gross domestic product per head, and see whether this is developing positively or negatively. And so the guys at Incaye and other business schools, they're now looking at how you can capture happiness of a population. Is this something which you can actually measure? If so, how can you measure it, and so on and so forth. So I think these kind of things are quite interesting and thought-provoking.
Okay, interesting. You said IB was profit focused. Now it is shifting to social responsibility.
Yeah, I think it is more and more shifting towards social responsibility. In general, I think more scholars are getting involved in CSR, social responsibility issues, sustainability issues. So from that point of view, I think this exclusive focus on profit, which we had, let me put 10 years ago, before the financial crisis, let's say it that way, that I think has been watered down, and it's quite good that it has been watered down and other variables are coming to the fore. But one has to be careful that we don't don't go overboard, because at the end of the day, multinationals still have to pay, and companies in general still have to generate profits in order to do good. But to think about what else is important other than profit, I think is definitely a good move.
About creativity in scholarship, what's your take on that? Where does creativity come from?
I think creativity, to me, is thinking out of the box. So to think about a phenomenon perhaps from a different angle, from a different perspective. To give you an example, I was involved in a JIPS article some time ago, which was on materialism. And everybody in the world knows materialism is bad. So our take on that was, is there a good side to materialism? We wrote on materialism in Asia and discovered some positive sides, some positive aspects on materialism. So essentially, if you have a phenomenon and perhaps put it in a completely different light, look at it in a completely different way, that is interesting and very often a sign of creativity, I would argue.
I was in a doctor's office, and this young child was watching Barbie. And Barbie said, there is nothing in life that a little glitter and shopping wouldn't fix. so from that one, yeah, happiness is there, creativity is right there.
Yeah.
But it's all in the glitter. About idle curiosity, what does your mind think of when it wanders in idle state?
Such as now. No, well, difficult to say. I think when I'm idle, I tend to be silly and think about silly things, such as whether I should teach in fancy dress, or whether we have the next AIB conference on the cruise ship, and so on. So it's basically non-serious stuff.
That is actually quite creative. Where do you see IB as a field in the next? What's going to be the next big trend in the field in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, you know the famous statement of Albert Einstein, who said, "I never think about the future. It comes early enough." And with increasing age, I can very much relate to that. But so with that caveat, that's difficult to think about the future. I think similar to what I said before, I think the purpose of multinationals will become more important. So the question of what are multinationals really for? Not just profit, but for example, a multinational role in achieving UN sustainability goals, or in general, the relationship between multinationals and politics. What I'm after is here, we have all seen the era where people were talking about the death of nation states, and we're saying, okay, nation states are dead, multinationals are taking over the world, etc., etc. And now the situation has reversed, and people have seen how important politics becomes again. And I think in the next few years that will be with us quite some time. So we will be talking more about let's say decoupling of supply chains, the digital divide between China and the rest of the world, and issues like this. So the impact of politics on multinationals and what they can and cannot do, I think, will become more important.
I mean, you're talking about this evolution, actually, and that actually leads to my next question about is it a fruitful evolution? You mentioned decoupling. You mentioned a lot emphasis on. You actually placed a lot of emphasis on social responsibility. It's the swing of a pendulum. This is going to come back again, and actually, it is coming back. Every day there are riots in England, in Germany is at unrest. Economic situation is dire, and things are not really moving towards that social responsibility sides, that extreme as much as it was a couple of years ago. What is this evolution, in your opinion? What are we losing along the way? Are we moving away from the primary IB foundations and moving into a different area?
Well, the primary IB area somehow was always interdisciplinary by nature, because even at the very beginning, when people talked about how to internationalize, how to essentially enter foreign markets, different foreign entry options, etc. These were always questions that had something to do with politics. And these were always questions that had to do something with cultural differences, etc. So IB, in my view, even from the very beginning, was very, very interdisciplinary, because it always involved a mix of political science, psychology, finance, sociology, marketing, strategy, and so on. So it all came together, and I think that makes the subject more, or makes the subject so interesting. Does it go in pendula, in the pendulum form, that we swing from one extreme to the other? I don't know. I mean, people essentially very often say history repeats itself, possibly. If you look at the speed of globalization, and you look at the history of globalization, we had periods where globalization slowed down dramatically and then picked up again. So maybe there is a repeat at the moment. And I think for the next 5 years or so, I don't really see that we are moving away from decoupling and regionalization towards a global boom again. I just cannot see it at the moment.
Okay, thank you. About mentoring and advice portion of the interview, what is one thing that you wish you had known when you were starting out that would save you so much time, pain, and agony?
What would I think I was actually pretty bad at statistics when I even started my PhD. So I would have loved to have more statistical knowledge in general, more methodological knowledge when I started my PhD. So that, I think, is very, very important. And at the end of the day, I had to be very autodidactic and teach myself quite a lot of this stuff. So a more systematic approach would have been better. When I see what kind of methodology courses PhD students now get at any halfway decent university, I always get envious, and then I always think, my gosh, these guys, they don't know what kind of wonderful time they have here, because they really get it on a plate. And so that, I think, is something which I can point out. That said, I think one has to be also careful that people are not too methodology focused, and there has to be a balance as well, because at the end of the day, phenomena are more important than methods, and not everything can be used and can be solved with the same methods. Not everything can be solved with a bunch of structural equation modeling approaches, but to research phenomena appears to be more important. So yeah, that's basically my take to that one.
It actually covers what skills, which skills are more important and difficult to develop is, say, methods, but obviously we're careful about the phenomena and theory. How is the process working for you with your PhD students? Do they come up with a great idea and you say, oh, this is the next best thing, go pursue it, or do you give them the idea? How is the process for you?
Well, it's a little bit of an iterative process. If it's a give and take. I try to be not too directive, because if I push them into an area and they just do it in order to get a PhD, their heart isn't in it. So to a certain degree, I think there is a danger that as a PhD supervisor, you become too directive and say, this is what you do. Which perhaps serves your own publication interests, but does not serve the students. So from that point of view, I try to shy away from that. The other thing is to ask questions. Ask questions. Why are you interested in this? Why should anybody else be interested in that? What would be the contribution from a theoretical side, from a managerial side, etc.? So essentially, ask loads and loads of questions in order to make sure that they in a way, discover the pros and cons of their own idea. So yeah, questioning. That's I think the key to it.
Do you see a difference between the current PhD students and the old ones from the past? Is there a difference in the student body?
That's again an interesting question in as far as that the difference is perhaps not so much, the difference I experience here is perhaps not so much in the students themselves, but in the opportunities they get. Because in the olden days, a PhD was a monolithic piece of work which you had to write and whatever 300 pages long, and it was all on one theme, etc., etc. And now the standard PhD we have here, at least in Vienna, is publish papers, and you need to publish papers in referee journals, and then you get a PhD based on that. Also, students now get quite a number of method courses which they have to do. They're compulsory, so they can't even opt out from them. So that's a big difference in the terms of approach to a PhD, but it's more of an institutional difference. With regards to the students, I think students at the moment seems to also go through some fashion topics. You know, nearly every second PhD is interested in sustainability and CSR. There's a lot of demand for that, and I think that is something which is perhaps the flavor of the day and may change in a couple of years again.
What are some of the major mistakes that you see young colleagues make, and mid-career colleagues as well? Top 3 mistakes that you think are things that we should talk about.
Top 3 mistakes. I think that one mistake is that they should define IB research not as research in a foreign country. I relate back to that when I was the editor of the Journal of International Marketing. We got quite a lot of submissions describing something and trying to sell something as international, simply because the context was non-American or non-European, and they thought, okay, it's in China or it's in Japan or it's in wherever, and hence it's an international topic. I think that's one of the mistakes. So not just thinking about the topic. Secondly, don't shy away from new topics. I think there is a tendency to go for low risk and look at yet another moderator or mediator and in an existing model and be very incrementalist. I think that is a relatively safe way of publishing, has been pointed out quite a lot, but it's not that interesting. So I think if you can afford it, if you have tenure, go for something which is perhaps a new topic and open a new perspective. So that would be my number 2. The third one, work with reviewers and not against reviewers. Reviewers are not enemies, to the extent that they obviously criticize you, and anybody who criticizes you, in particular if you're a professor and nobody criticizes you ever, no students dares, then the reviewers come along and they criticize you, then you very often, your initial reaction is, well, you know, how dare he or she or whatever. And then I think it's good to step back, to perhaps put the review to the side, and in a week later or a few days later come and read it again and say, well, actually they have a point, and perhaps, you know, I can do this better, and perhaps I should have done that better, and perhaps it's my mistake because I didn't explain it well enough, etc. So essentially think about the reviewer as really people who, by and large, there are obviously exceptions, but by and large they want to help you, and to recognize this and to embrace this as something which is a creative and constructive process. I think that is also something which people should do.
Apparently, I got exceptional reviewers last time. So the guy was apparently foaming in the mouth, and I'm still trying to get over that one. It's been like 6 months. No, some people are simply angry and bitter. I mean, I always say this about some reviewers. Thank God for good editors. Thank God for good associate editors who see through it. Last question. What's the question that I should have asked you but haven't?
The top secret question. Well, I've got 3 passports, actually, 3 legal passports. Namely, I'm Austrian, British, and German. And so I'm asked very often, who do you support in international sports competitions? You know, because that's always an issue. So, yeah, you could have asked me that.
There's a soccer.
I would have answered that. That's another question. I might not answer that.
Okay, who do you root for? There's Britain is playing against Germany. Who do you root for?
Well, I would argue the other way around. I would say, okay, it depends on the sports, because in winter, I'm supporting the Austrian ski team because they tend to be quite good. Britain, I tend to support in terms of motorsports, and admittedly Germany in terms of soccer. So I normally do it that way around. Yeah.
Beautiful. This was very helpful. This was interesting. Thank you so much, Bodo, for your time. I learned a lot. I'm sure the audience will agree with me. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and good luck with the rest of your interviews.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.